Good morning. This is your sermon message as we have canceled the services and are attempting to offer some sacred rhythm in this very weird, discombobulated time of social distancing and quarantines and isolation and public health and pandemics. So we'll record these while we need to and share them this way, and we'll look for any suggestions that you may have. We looked at trying to do, at the board meeting, we looked at trying to do an online service where people could interact and be completely engaged, as we had done a couple of years ago when we had to cancel for snow. But technology being what it is and it causing problems and frustrations and headaches and being unreliable at times, we thought we would just make it easier on folks to do it this way. So glad to be joining you on Sunday morning or whenever you get to this video. In the email, you'll have it laid out just as you would for a regular Sunday morning for our regular liturgy. And that being a reminder that what we do on Sunday is actually a pattern and a rhythm that you can take through your week. And so you can use those songs and those prayers and those practices in your day-to-day walk or in your weekly walk as you go through that. And so hopefully they're there and you can make the most of that. Obviously this is a different way of teaching and preaching, and so it'll be more of a Bible study, if you will, as I share a few thoughts on the text that we have for this morning. And they're an invitation for you to crack open your own Bible and spend a little bit of time in prayerful reading and meditation, not only now, but as you go through your week. This week, we're picking up the series through Lent that we've been going through and looking at the sermons that are offered throughout Matthew. There are 5 discourses or 5 sermons that Matthew offers in his gospel, and this week we'll focus on the second one. The first and most prominent of the sermons that we have is his Sermon on the Mount that we spoke on last week, and that talks directly about really the people that are close to the kingdom, as Jesus names it. And Jesus names those who would have been on the margins, particularly during the time that he was giving that message. And so he says those on the margins actually are the ones who are closest. The margins of the religious system are the ones who are closest to the kingdom of God, because their hearts and their minds and their lives are at a place where the kingdom light can kind of break in. And it's their lives that are the light and the salt of the world. And so that's a good reminder for us as we step into this next one, which is in Matthew 10. And so the Sermon on the Mount covers 3 chapters, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And it is that discourse that shows us kind of the foundation of what the kingdom is and how the kingdom is approached and how that's in contrast to the kingdom that is understood otherwise. And from that, we come out of that into chapter 8, where we see Jesus performing a number of miracles, healing many people, healing those with leprosy. We see him declaring the faith of the Roman officer as one that should be an example for the people of Israel. And we hear this challenge of the cost of following Jesus, that it bears a weight for those who actually choose to follow Jesus fully in what he's calling us to. We see him challenge the disciples as they cry out during a storm on the boat, where he calls our faith to elevate towards the challenge and not to minimize towards the fear. And that's a key part that'll play into chapter 10. And then in 9, as he begins to heal more, we then now begin to see the Pharisees and the religious leaders begin to challenge Jesus and his message and what he's doing. And so they come with this skepticism and this judgment against who he is and what he's able to do, and the way that he approaches doing ministry, because it challenges theirs. And at the end of 9, we have this, chapter 9 in Matthew, we have this text where it says that he traveled through the city and the villages and the towns, teaching in the synagogues, announcing the good news of the kingdom, And wherever he went, there were all sorts of people filled with diseases and illness, and he took great compassion upon them, because their needs were so great, and they didn't know where to go for help, and there were few to help with the work. So that the harvest was great, and that he would be able to find workers to send out to work in the fields. And so this brings us into this sermon, chapter 10. And this is the sending of the 12 apostles. This is called the Little Commission, which is in contrast to the Great Commission that we get later in Matthew. And it differs for a number of reasons. And the way that we're going to walk through this today is we're going to go through the who, the where, the how, and the what of this message, and what that then means specifically for us at Faith. And it's pretty timely with everything that's going on with the coronavirus and what Jesus has to share in that for those who he's sharing it to. So I hope you hear some real powerful messages in what we're sharing today. So let's start with the who. Who is going in this? Again, chapter 9, we see this great compassion moves Jesus towards the crowds, but the need is far greater than what even Jesus is able to meet. And so he needs this additional invitation. And so we see that he calls the 12 disciples. Disciples, we understand, means learner. And so this group of people who were learning from the rabbi how to do life. Jesus being the rabbi, the teacher who was going to show them this. And then it also calls them the apostles. And the apostles means the sent ones. And so they've been learning for a period of time, and now Jesus is ready for them to get out there and to do the work that they've been seeing him do in that same manner, in the same spirit, in the same rhythm. And so we see a few important things that are worth pointing out here. We see that God, that Jesus specifically, he chooses them, that he's always looking for men and women to use. And we see this throughout the story of God, where God is saying, who am I going to send? Right? We see this when he calls Samuel in the temple, when he's under the care of Levi, when he wakes up 3 times in the night with a dream. That it's who am I going to send? That Samuel is given the instruction by Levi to tell the vision, the voice that he's hearing in the night. Here I am, God, talk to me, send me. We hear this in Isaiah when he hears this message from the kingdom of I need people to go. Who's going to go and deliver this message for me? So who am I going to send? God is choosing them, and he's inviting them into this. He's not coercing them. He's not compelling them. He doesn't coerce. He compels us. He's not demanding us to do this. He's inviting us to do this. He doesn't conscript us to do this, but he's seeking volunteers. So this is this invitational spirit that God offers us. And that a man in this position, a man and woman in this position, chooses to be faithful just as much as we are free to be faithless. And so we have to recognize this, that if we choose to be faithful in going, but we also can choose to be faithless in our approach to this. And this is something that's very disconcerting for Jesus, that many people who will call out to Christ throughout his ministry, but there are very few who will actually follow in the footsteps to do the work that he's calling us to do. And so that's an important message in this sermon as well. And then that he appoints us, he ordains us, which we usually use, that's a big word. We use it for clergy, but ordaining just means that we are called, we're commissioned, we're seen. Like that is a holy, blessed, sacred act. That as we go, we're fully covered in the Spirit and the power of God, and that we're given all the assets and the tools that we need. And so we don't just drift unconsciously into the work of God, but it comes with this intentional calling of going. And then it's also important for us to recognize who's in this group, right? This is a very common group. They are not the elite scholars and disciples that most rabbis would choose, and that within this group, there are differences within this group. And so two in particular that we see, we know of Simon the Zealot, and the Zealots were part of this Jewish religious party, and the Zealots were zealous. They were warlike. They would organize these militias to fight the Roman Empire. They kind of had this bloodlust for what they were wanting to do, that they wanted to weaponize their faith for the sake of the kingdom. And Jesus invites this into his inner circle. And on the other side of the aisle, you have Matthew, the tax collector, who raises money from the Jewish people for their taxes that would go and fund this Roman enemy that they live in this oppression under. Okay, and so both of these sit within Jesus's inner circle, which is he's showing us then how the kingdom works. That these external political mindset do not fit within the kingdom structure, right? Or they're limited to what the kingdom is calling us to. It speaks very much to the political parties that we have in America today, that the kingdom message is above and beyond what they are articulating and speaking of, and that we have to be careful of that as Christians to make sure that we don't get caught up in that. And so he offers us that. And the stress, one of the key things that is being stressed in this work is that when it comes to the gospel work, it is never the workers who are emphasized, but it's always the work that is being done that is emphasized. And that the church is built upon this this method of the common person being mobilized for the sake of a message that is bigger than the individuals. So that's who he's sending. These common folks who have this discord internally, they're the ones going out to the message, to deliver this message. And where are they going? Well, we get immediately that they are to go out and not go to the Gentiles or the Samaritans, which is crazy for us, right? So he's saying go to the Jews. In other words, go preach to the choir. Go preach to the people who will know this message and are familiar with this message. That the Jews have the right to the kingdom. And that this stands in contrast to the sermon we get later, which is the Great Commission, right? Which is to go out to all the worlds, go to the Gentiles, to the Samaritans, to every corner of the earth, teaching them what I have commanded you and baptizing them in the name of the Holy Spirit. And here we get a whole different, do not go to those, do not go that far. Your focus is to be on the Jews. Why? Well, this is early in the ministry, so the disciples were probably unprepared. They're not ready to go to the Gentiles, but they know the Jewish language. They know the Jewish story. So stay with what you know and focus on that, and let's strengthen this foundation. Let's strengthen what we know and build this momentum as we look to take this message out to the rest of the world. Don't diffuse the objective. Keep it focused, keep it close, keep it tight, and let's build the base so that this can reach further than it would otherwise. So that's who's going and where they're going, and then how are they going to go? They're going out as apostles, those who are sent. This is the language of an ambassador as a representative. They're going out. Another translation uses the word that they're going to herald the message. We know this from Christmas songs, Hark the Herald, the Angels Sing. Heralds were messengers. In fact, it's the same word for angel in the Greek. The word angel and messenger is the same word. And so they're going out as messengers into the world, and that usually when they go out, that message is a good message, and it's an enthusiastic message. So they're going out with this enthusiastic message that they want to share, and they're going out in this posture that follows what would have been the rabbinical method or rhythm, the Talmudic, which is the Jewish teaching of the law or the theology. They would have followed under those rules. And one of the basic rules in teaching or heralding the message was that, because all the work of the Jewish people was in the sanctuary or the temple, was that you never took your business affairs into the Jewish temple, right? And we see Jesus challenges this later about making the temple a marketplace. So we have to understand the Talmud would not allow you to don't mix business and religion. Don't make the religion a marketplace. And so he sends them out with very little belongings, in the same sense that he's saying the world is now the temple of God. And I'm sending you out into the world and with this message that will not be misconstrued or confused by being a business thing. So I'm not sending you out with a sales pitch, but just this good, enthusiastic message to go share with the people. And what do they say? And this is maybe the most interesting piece of this, that they are to go out to announce the kingdom is near, to heal the sick, raise the dead, cure those with leprosy, and cast out demons. Some would say this is still the call of the church. And I wouldn't disagree with them. To heal the sick, to raise the dead, to cure those with leprosy, and cast out the demons. And that certainly resonates today. Resonates very much right now with what's going on in the world. But raise the dead? Like, this is like zombie apocalypse stuff, right? Raise the dead. And we don't really, we hear this, but we don't really hear any stories. And you think these stories would be pretty profound if they were happening, right? That if they're raising the dead, hey, give us a little story of what this looks like. We even have Jesus later on who is brought in front of a young girl who they believe is dead, and he says, oh, she's not dead, she's just asleep and she should get up. And they lose it, right? She does, she raises up off the mat, and the town goes nuts with that sign. But Jesus dismisses it as not this thing if she's not physically dead. And so we can get really confused with this. Are we healing the sick? Are we raising the dead? Are we cleansing the lepers of their diseases? Are we casting out these demons? And so what I'd say is we can take this literal interpretation and say that yes, we should be doing these things. Or we should look at this figuratively as well. Because I don't think God cannot not do that. I think God absolutely it powers us, and if he wills it, that those things can happen. But I've not seen that happen. I've not been around those things, and usually in the grand sense of the term that we think of these things. But what if there's something else that he's calling for when he calls for healing the sick and raising the dead and cleansing the leper and casting out demons? What if healing the sick, one translation that I saw said that this is about healing the weak. That this is about healing the spiritual side over the physical side, dealing with the emotional sense, healing with the sin that is within the hearts of people, more than it is healing the way that sometimes that we think about it. And so healing the spiritual side, recognizing that comes with an emotional aspect, a mental aspect of healing our narratives. In the Apprentice series, the groups that we do a lot of work around healing our narratives and redeeming them and identifying them in our lives. And recognizing that healing looks different, that sometimes healing comes in an instant, right? With a headache, I can heal it with a little bit of medicine. With a crying child, it can be healed with a hug almost instantly. But then also that there's other healings that's more gradual, that heart disease or cancer can be cured through longer timelines or protocols, through surgery or treatment, right? That my mother's hip surgery took almost 2 years. With the infection that came, with the surgery that happened, the healing came. And so recognizing that healing looks like different things with different timelines in different scenarios. When we talk about raising the dead, that maybe it's not necessarily funeral dead coming back to life, but that it's raising the spiritual dead. Raising that which thing that's grown so cynical and jaded and cut off that maybe there's a chance for resurrection there. That life can be animated, that hopes and dreams, and even the hope in humanity can be restored as they experience some healing within themselves and within their own narratives. That they cleanse the leper. Lepers were seen as polluted people. They were unclean. They were polluted. They were dirty. They were stained. And certainly we know people like this, right? That they've gone through a circumstance that if they've gone through addiction or if they've gone through some past poor behavior in their past, we kind of leave this stain upon their life, and they're always kind of this polluted person and kind of beyond redemption. And Christians get in this as well. And so recognizing that people can move beyond that stain or that pollution that is a part of their story, that can be redeemed. And fourth, casting out demons. Yeah, that those who are under another power, power of addiction, power of greed, power of anger, power of power, that there's healing there, that there's redemption there, that they can eliminate being dominated by that evil that lures their passions and their attention from something or someone else. That Jesus not only cancels sin in our lives, but he breaks the power over sin. And so maybe when they're going out, maybe it's not the literal healing of the sick, raising the dead, cleaning the leper, casting out demons the way we think of it, but more in that spiritual sense that there's something deeper going on there that Jesus speaks to or redeems or offers in this space. And that he's doing that again for the Israels, for the Israelites, for the Jews, not for the Gentiles. We're going to focus on, we're going to preach to the choir. We're going to get the choir strong and make sure that we're solid there before we go out. Now here's where this matters for us at Faith Community. Because if we're honest, the past 2 years at Faith have been a little crazy, a little tough. We've had lots of hardships. We've seen a lot of death and sickness in and around our family. We've endured a lot of painful losses in that way. We've experienced financial strain, ups and downs. We've weathered uncertainty and certainly more. And yet through all this, God has been incredibly gracious with us. The board has been phenomenal in their leadership and the way that they have helped us navigate kind of these storms, not losing faith and rising to the challenge. And as we are moving forward with looking at what is the future of faith and where does that lie, the board wants to move forward with a vision to dream, with a vision of hope. And we've come back to what we want to do is we want to lean into our people, into our church, because when you look at Faith Community and where it's been and who it's been and how it's been, the reality is the best thing that has always been about Faith Community has been our people. Always. And so we want to hear you, we want to see you, we want to come alongside you, we want to turn around and come back to focusing on us, to focus on you, to focus on us collectively, because as we strengthen ourselves, just as the disciples were called to do in this little commission, to go back and preach to the choir, but not preach in a way of impugning this guilt or this shame on us, but we want to build one another up, build each other up, strengthen our relationships and our ties, heal the things that have been hurt and broken within us, and to restore this. What does this mean? Well, it means you're going to see the board be a lot more intentional in the next few weeks and months. That we have, we're working with our shepherding groups, which are lists that each board member has of members in our church of who they're going to be intentional with following up with and reaching out to. And that's going to be super important as we're in this kind of isolation phase as a society right now. And so we're going to be intentional with reaching out. And we're also going to ask you not to be shy about reaching out. We're going to get those lists published so you can see that. If you're on our email distribution and you don't see your name on a list and you want to be on a list, let us know. We'll put you on that. Excluding you from that list, we're focusing on those who we've seen over the last few months who have leaned in. And so if you want to lean in with us during this time, let us know that. And we'll make sure you get back on a list. We weren't excluding you to be exclusive. We were just paying attention to those who've been around and have been involved with stuff. And so we're going to be checking in with you. We're going to be praying for you. We're going to be, as we get out of this forced social isolation, we're going to be finding times where we're intentional about making sure we're getting together to share life, to break bread, to have conversations. Because out of that, as we build that fabric again, that means we're also going to dream. You heard Jeff this last week talk about in our Sunday gathering that we want to dream, that we want to hear your heart's desires, that we want to think outside the box. We want to hear where you want to use your ministry and mission and calling, and how we may be able to come alongside you as a church in some way. And so we want to recognize that. We want to hear that because we think that as we sing our heart's desires, right? I think of the Les Miserables song, that as you hear the people singing the songs of angry men, right? Angry at injustice, angry at all the things that aren't happening, that we began to move beyond where we are and into fresh spaces that we've been dreaming about. And so that's part of this. And that we hope that you'll join us with that we'll have these conversations, that we'll dream, that we'll build this community around that, just as Jesus did with the disciples here in chapter 10 of Matthew. And that as we do this, we'll seize the opportunity to show neighborly love. We'll seize the opportunity to support each other during this time. We'll seize the opportunity to push back fear and pour out a radical love that can offer healing, that can rescue those who are polluted, that can raise the dead, that can cast out the demons. So I want to close with a prayer. It's a prayer for the pandemic that I've stumbled across, written by Cameron Berlin. And as we're in this isolation, find ways to reach out to others in our church, but also to show love to those who are around you in ways that keep you safe, but keep them safe. And so let me leave you with this. May we who are merely inconvenienced remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember those who are most vulnerable. May we have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making their rent. May we who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close remember those who don't have options. May we who have to cancel our trips remember those who have no safe place to go. May we who are losing margin money in the tumult of the economic market remember those who have no margin at all. May we who settle in the quarantines at home remember those who have no home. And as fear grips our country, let us choose love. During this time when we cannot physically wrap our arms around one another, let us find other ways to lovingly embrace God and the God who loves our neighbors. May God be with you as you travel into this week. I look forward to connecting with you online, in phone calls, and other ways. Take care.